The sun had barely begun to sink when Clara Dalton's truck rumbled to a stop at the edge of the McCall ranch. Dust trailed behind her like the ghosts of every bad choice she'd made since leaving this place 5 years ago. The air was dry, sharp with sagebrush and old memories, and the horizon was painted in streaks of orange and gold. She sat there for a long minute, her fingers gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. Everything looked the same. The worn fences, the creaking windmill, the smell of earth and hay. Everything except her. She'd come back older, heavier with regrets, and desperate enough to face the one man she never thought she'd see again. Her father's voice echoed in her head, the last message he'd sent before he disappeared. "McCall's the only one who can help. Go to him. He'll understand." But she wasn't sure Rhett McCall would understand anything. Not after what she'd done to him. When she finally pushed open the door, the evening wind caught her hair and tangled it across her face. The sound of horses came from the stables, steady, rhythmic, grounding. She followed it like a beacon, each step crunching on the dry gravel path that led her straight to the barn doors she'd once painted herself as a teenager. The door creaked open, and there he was. Rhett stood in the half-light, brushing down his chestnut stallion, his movements unhurried, strong, and certain. His back was to her at first, broad shoulders beneath a worn denim shirt, sleeves rolled up, forearms tanned and dusted with sweat. He still looked exactly like the man she remembered, maybe harder, maybe colder, but unmistakably Rhett. "Rhett," she said softly, though her voice came out smaller than she wanted. He turned slowly, his hand stilling on the horse's flank. For a heartbeat, his expression didn't change, just a flicker of disbelief, quickly smothered beneath something unreadable. "Clara Dalton," he said, voice low, rough like gravel dragged under boot heels. "Thought I'd seen the last of you." She tried to smile, but her lips faltered. Guess fate had other plans. He set the brush down, leaning one hand against the stall door. The setting sun caught the edge of his jaw, lighting the faint scar just below his ear, the one she remembered tracing once, long ago, when love had been simpler. "What are you doing here?" "I came about my father," she said quickly. "You know he owes you money." Rhett gave a slow nod, his expression unreadable. "Owes me. That's one way to put it." Her pulse jumped. "I'll pay it. Somehow. I just need." He stepped closer then, and she froze. He didn't touch her, but the weight of his nearness felt heavier than any hand. "You don't have the kind of money your father owes, Clara. He made a deal he couldn't keep. And now you're standing here, hoping you can fix it for him." "I have to try." He studied her, eyes dark and intent. "Why?" "He never tried for you." The words cut sharper than she expected. She looked away, blinking fast. "Because he's still my father." Silence stretched between them, thick, humming with things unsaid. The only sound was the restless shifting of the horse behind him. Rhett finally sighed, pushing away from the stall. "You shouldn't have come back here." Clara lifted her chin. "You're probably right. But I didn't have anywhere else to go." He walked past her, out into the evening light. For a moment, she just stood there, gathering herself before following. The world outside the barn seemed too wide, too quiet. Rhett stopped near the fence, the sky turning bruised and gold behind him. "When you left," he said finally, not looking at her, "you didn't even say goodbye. Just gone. Like none of it mattered." "It mattered," she whispered. "More than you know." "Then why?" Her throat tightened. "Because I was scared. You were talking about staying, about building something here, and she swallowed. "I didn't think I was enough for you." "Not then." He turned to her at last, eyes narrowing. "And now?" She hesitated. "Now I don't have the luxury of pride." Something in his face softened, but only for a heartbeat. "So, what do you want from me, Clara?" "I want to make things right. I'll work, help on the ranch, do whatever it takes." Rhett crossed his arms, the faintest smirk tugging at his lips, a humorless, weary thing. "You. Back on a ranch. You couldn't wait to get out of here. You said this life was a cage." Her voice trembled. "Maybe it was. But right now, It's the only cage that's open to me. He was quiet again, the sound of distant crickets rising between them. Finally, he spoke, his tone lower, rougher. You can stay. For the season. Relief hit her like a wave, but it broke too soon. He took a step closer, and this time his eyes held her without mercy. But understand something, Clara. I don't forget debts. Not your father's. Not yours. She met his gaze, heartbeat thundering. And what do I owe you? Rhett's voice was soft, but there was steel beneath it. A truth. Maybe two. And a promise you won't run again. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She'd come here to make amends, not to unearth the past. But the look in his eyes told her it was already too late for that. He turned away, his shadow long against the fading light. You can take the guest room. Supper's in an hour. Don't be late. Clara watched him go, her stomach tight, her pulse thrumming in her ears. The air around her felt charged, as if the ranch itself remembered what they'd been. As the sun sank behind the ridge and the first stars appeared, she stood alone by the fence, her hands trembling on the splintered wood. She could feel the weight of the years pressing in from all sides, the hurt, the distance, the unfinished pull between them. Maybe coming back was the biggest mistake of her life. Or maybe, deep down, it was the only thing she was ever meant to do. Because even after all the years, all the silence, one thing had never changed. When Rhett McCall looked at her, the rest of the world fell away. And that night, beneath the gathering dark, she finally admitted to herself the truth she'd been running from since the day she left. She hadn't just come back to pay off her father's debt. She'd come back for him. The night had settled deep over the McCall ranch, the kind of silence that made every creak, every whisper of the wind, feel louder than it should. The sky stretched endlessly above, scattered with stars so clear they almost looked close enough to touch. Inside the main house, the old grandfather clock ticked steadily, marking the hours Clara couldn't sleep through. She lay in the guest room, the one Rhett had given her without a word of warmth. The sheets were clean, but the air was heavy, thick with unspoken history. The faint scent of cedar and smoke drifted through the open window, pulling her back to the memories she'd tried so hard to bury. Her mind wouldn't quiet. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him, standing by the fence at dusk, that look in his eyes when he'd said, I don't forget debts. Clara sat up, pulling her knees close to her chest. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was something else entirely. But she needed air. She needed to see him. The house was dim, lit only by the flickering light from the living room hearth. The floorboards creaked softly under her bare feet as she walked, her thin flannel shirt brushing against her arms. Outside, the coyotes howled far off in the hills, and somewhere in the distance a horse kicked against its stall. Then she saw him. Rhett was sitting in the armchair near the fire, the orange glow casting shadows across his face. He wasn't wearing his hat now. His dark hair was tousled, his shirt half unbuttoned, revealing a hint of the scar she remembered tracing with trembling fingers years ago. A half-empty glass of whiskey sat on the table beside him. He didn't look surprised when she stepped into the light. You shouldn't be up, he said, his voice calm but low, carrying that familiar rasp that once used to melt every piece of her resolve. Neither should you, she replied softly. Rhett looked at her for a moment, then leaned back in his chair, eyes unreadable. Guess old habits die hard. Clara crossed the room, her heartbeat loud enough to drown the quiet. She stood near the fireplace, warming her hands against the heat. I used to love nights like this, she said quietly. The way the fire made everything feel softer. Safer. He gave a small, humorless laugh. Safe isn't something we ever were, Clara. She looked at him then. Really looked. At the man he'd become, the roughness in his features, the wear in his voice. You've changed, she said. So have you. I had to. Yeah, he said, swirling the amber in his glass. Seems like life made sure of that. The words hung there, heavy, until Clara broke the silence. Rhett, about before, about the way I left. He cut her off, his voice sharp. Don't. I've heard every version of that story in my head already. None of them made it hurt less. She flinched. I didn't mean to hurt you. But you did. His tone softened, but it didn't lose its edge. You left like what we had didn't matter. No letter. No word. Just gone. I was scared, she said again, the same words from before, but this time her voice cracked. I didn't think I could live up to what you wanted. He stood then, slow and deliberate, his shadow falling long across the wooden floor. All I wanted was you. Clara felt her breath catch. There it was, the truth she'd been avoiding, raw and steady between them. He took a step closer. The air seemed to tighten, the firelight painting his face in shades of gold and shadow. You walked out on me, Clara. And I told myself I'd never let you close again. But then tonight, his hand flexed at his side, uncertain, betraying a feeling he didn't want to name. You walk through that door, and it's like the last 5 years never happened. Her throat burned. Then don't fight it, she whispered. Rhett's jaw tensed. You think it's that simple? You can't just come back and. I didn't come back to fix us, she interrupted, tears brightening her eyes. I came because I didn't know where else to go. But now that I'm here, she took a shaky breath. I can't pretend I don't still feel it. That pull. That. Whatever this is. For a long moment, he said nothing. The only sound was the crackle of the fire and the slow, unsteady rhythm of two hearts caught in a moment neither wanted to admit. Then, quietly, he said, You still don't get it, do you? You never needed to be enough. You already were. Clara's eyes widened, the tears threatening to spill. Then why do you sound so angry? Because I spent years trying to forget you, Rhett said. And the second I saw you tonight, all of it came back. The wanting. The hurt. The damn hope. He took another step toward her, stopping just inches away. The heat from the fire pressed between them, mingling with the warmth of their breath. She could smell the faint hint of whiskey on his skin, the scent of dust and cedar that had always clung to him. Her heart raced, wild and unsteady. Rhett, she breathed. He reached up then, brushing a loose strand of hair from her cheek. His fingers lingered, rough against her skin. You shouldn't have come back, he whispered. I know, she said, her voice trembling. But I'm glad I did. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. And then the distance between them disappeared. Not with words, but with the quiet, magnetic inevitability of two people who had spent too long pretending they were over each other. Outside, the wind picked up, sweeping across the open fields and rattling the old ranch windows. Inside, the fire burned low, casting shadows that danced like ghosts of their past across the walls. When Rhett finally pulled back, he didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The look in his eyes said everything, that no matter what had been lost, some nights were meant to stay with you forever. And for Clara, that night on the ranch would be one of them.